Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله اما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Brothers and sisters, before getting into the theme of Khutbah today, I once again ask that we remember our brothers and sisters throughout this Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad who may be in some kind of suffering or distress. That suffering and distress may be even within our own households. It may be our brothers, it may be our sisters, it may be our children. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve the misery and suffering of the members of this Ummah wherever we are. And I want us today to ask Allah to continue to bless the Muslims of Syria. After having overcome 50 years of a father and son, brutal dictatorship, and now for the first time in over 50 years, the Muslims of Syria and the people of Syria are once again able to feel what it's like to not have an authoritarian dictatorship stopping the progress in the lives, causing so much problem amongst the nation. And I'm not saying this as an endorsement of any political party in Syria. I'm saying this because it was very clear that there was boom, oppression that has been present in this Muslim nation. And now, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what seemed at one point to be an impossibility because of the police and military might of this particular regime. Now, the starter of this authoritarian regime, Allah has taken him years ago, and now his son has fled the country. So it should be encouraging for us as we look throughout the Muslim world, as we look within the community right here in America, that when we see that Muslims are being oppressed, no matter what form or shape that it may take, that it doesn't mean that this is a permanent condition for the believers. And I truly believe by just making dua and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help relieve the suffering of our brothers and sisters, that those duas count. It's very encouraging as well to look on the African continent and look into Europe and see a nation that colonized so many of the African states on this African continent by the French, who were just robbing the nations that they had colonized for decades, almost a century, and having them pay these nations like Burkina Faso, like Mali, like others, having them to pay for the luxury of being colonized and having your resources taken away. Alhamdulillah, there's a movement today when we see what's going on in these countries that are heavily populated by Muslims, these Francophone states. They're telling France, you got to get out of here. We've had enough of you. That you've stifled the growth and development of us as nations for far too long. And let us pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just in the Francophone states on the African continent, but wherever nations are colonizing and exerting dictatorial control over the resources and the people in the lands of the Muslims, make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relieve this ummah of that kind of oppression. Brothers and sisters, we are very close to the beginning of another month of Ramadan. And last night at Maghrib, we recognized that it was the 15th day of Shaban. And it varies, the recognition varies throughout the Muslim lands and various Muslim cultures. that many Muslim cultures just look at it on the calendar and just say, well, we're just 2 weeks away from the month of Ramadan. But throughout this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, there are many Muslim nations who are fixed, and there's reason for them to have the practice and understanding that this particular day is an important day on the Muslim calendar. It's not like an Eid, it's not like a day of celebration. But there are hadith that say that on this particular day, on this 15th of Shaban, that the qadr, that the record for the coming year is put down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the accuracy of the strength of those hadith that say that. But there are Muslims across the world who recognize that particular phenomenon and not use it as a holiday, but use it as a special day of asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness and for his mercy. Brothers and sisters, I want to just take a few moments of your time today. And there's so many ayahs in the Quran that just speak volumes. Just one ayah, and we could spend almost the rest of our lives trying to fully understand and to implement the guidance of these ayahs into our personal practices as believers. And some of these ayahs we are very familiar with, but today I want to share one that everyone in this room would have to be familiar with this particular ayah if we're reading the Quran at all, that if, in fact, we are reading this Quran with the intention of using it for guidance, and we're turning to the prophetic hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu to give us the guidance as to how do I incorporate what this ayah is instructing me to do or not to do. Just turn to the guidance of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, and we have the clear direction and understanding. And the ayah that I want to share is an ayah, as I said, that all of us would be familiar with this ayah. It's Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. O you who believe, fear Allah as he should be feared, and die not except for in a state of Islam or in a state of submission. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding us to, and saying this to the believers. It's addressing those of us who claim that we are following this Quran and we're following the guidance of his Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically addressed this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this ayah. And he's telling us to fear him, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as he should be feared, at the first portion of the ayah. And how is it that we understand what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying? Fear him as he should be feared. So we turn to the prophetic sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I'll get to the second part of the ayah. We turn to this prophetic sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a prophetic hadith that's found in Bukhari, he gives us a number of instructions in this regard, and he tells us to fear Allah, for he is the one who will hold you accountable for your deeds. And so one aspect, one dimension to this fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of us will get weak at some point. We have to recognize what we've done and return to Allah, begging him for forgiveness. And so the Prophet Muhammad is reminding us in this ayah, fear Allah, because he's the one who's going to hold us accountable for everything that we do. So that doesn't mean that we walk around like a child waiting to get spanked for something they're doing wrong. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so merciful to us as human beings that he doesn't hold us to account for every error, every violation of his guidance immediately. As a matter of fact, Allah is so merciful that he may withhold any kind of action against us for what we do wrong. The Prophet Muhammad went on to tell us that and explain to us this concept of tawakkul, how are we fearing Allah, what's motivating us to do this. And the Prophet in another hadith contained in the Sahih of Bukhari, he says, beware, in the body there is a piece of flesh. If it is sound, the whole body is sound. And if it is corrupt, the whole body is corrupt. And that piece of flesh is the heart. There's another hadith where the Prophet Muhammad in explaining this concept of how important the heart is for believers, he was explaining taqwa, this fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said, and patted his chest over his heart 3 times, it's related, that how he patted his chest over his heart on three consecutive times. And he says that this is where taqwa lies. Our taqwa is not coming from our brain and coming and what we do in our acts of submission. It's coming, what we do is coming from the condition of our hearts. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us purity in our hearts, if we're striving to have our actions governed by pure hearts, then this taqwa has an opportunity to grow. And our actions will reflect the condition of our hearts. Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it very easy for us to understand that we will be held responsible for those things that we do knowingly and unknowingly that are going against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have us do. And so when we think about the situations and conditions, and how should we respond to this? And how should I take this? And how should you take back these things that occur in our lives on a day-to-day basis? Again, all we need to do is turn to this prophetic sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. And you will see how the Prophet Muhammad, in all circumstances, that he never acted out of character. He never did anything in his prophetic life, in his 23 years of prophetic life, that anyone could look at his behavior as people are trying to humiliate him. As this woman that every time she would see him, she would try to throw garbage and trash on his head. How Fatima, the beloved daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, heard, she was in the house and she heard that these mushrikeen have taken the insides, the entrails of a cow or a camel and put it on the back of your father while he's making salat around the Kaaba. And this young girl at this time came and took all of that waste that it wasn't like it's good edible insides. It's something that was no good. It's something that would be thrown away. And our messenger, the Prophet Muhammad, had people finding entertainment by trying to humiliate him, even while he was making salat. But what was his response? Did he jump up and start cursing the people? Did he start calling them names? Did he get a security force and say, everywhere I walk, I want you to stand by me so nothing harmful can happen to me? Brothers and sisters, this example, the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad is the perfect commentary on the ayahs of the Quran as it relates to attitudes and actions that you and I are to follow on a day-to-day basis. Brothers and sisters, there are many scholars, and I accept this particular opinion about some of the Muslim scholars who have written about and talked about everyone being muttaqin. That everyone who professes belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and belief in the prophetic methodology of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, everyone who accepts the Quran as from divine source and from Allah, and accepts the responsibility to follow the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are Muslim scholars who said that every single one of those Muslims can be said that they are muttaqin, that they have the fear of Allah. Otherwise, why are they wasting their time? But there are different degrees of having this fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these different degrees and the different conditions of our hearts are those motivators. They are those governors or lack of governance that cause us to refrain from doing what's haram and push us to do what's halal, what's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The taqwa of the Prophet Muhammad was unrivaled. But the taqwa of all of the messengers and prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in their society, we know that they had the greatest taqwa of anyone in their communities and in their societies. And so in order for us to even come to Salatul Jumah, in order for us to pray 5 times a day, in order for us to fast to the best of our human capacity and pray, increase our ibadah during the month of Ramadan, every one of us would have to be on some level of being classified as being muttaqin, that we're people who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the difference between this brother, this sister, and these the individual Muslim actions, what they display on a day-to-day basis, is the condition of our heart and how clean we have been able to put our heart in a state of purity. And this comes from the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Brothers and sisters, the thought should cause all of us to shake. When we think about there's nothing that we can do in our lives, there's nothing even that we can have thoughts about doing that are against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded for us to do or to not do. There's nothing about human behavior that avoids the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it should be a scary thought for us. It should be a scary thought when we remind ourselves that when I'm out of the public view, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has assigned angels to write down everything that I'm doing. People don't have to see what I'm doing because it's being recorded. by the angels that are assigned to us as human beings. And so when we start putting this consciousness in the forefront of our minds and our hearts, we have to change our behavior. We have to do better than what we're doing. Even though we know that the Prophet Muhammad and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and especially in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad that he has warned us about backbiting and slander. That we know consequences that he told his beloved daughter Fatima when Fatima made a gesture that was pointing out the height of her co-wife Zainab. And she was just referencing, as the Prophet Muhammad said something about her, and Zainab took her arm and her hand and did a motion that would suggest that this sister's a midget. She's this tall. Is this who you're talking about? And the Prophet Muhammad for that simple statement told her that 70 years down into Jahannam, does that word and language that you're using, that this is haram, this is something forbidding to the members of this ummah. And so we just so comfortably talk about each other, like, and lie on each other, and just pass on things that were given in confidence, but we feel so comfortable that I'm a believer. I'm muttaqeen. I'm praying 5 times a day. I'm fasting during the month of Ramadan. I'm doing all of those things. Where does this comfort level come from? It's got to come from shaitan. There's nothing in this deen would give any one of us the kind of complacency to just feel that I'm going to be all right. That I'm not worried about standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, laden, burdened down with the sins that I've committed in this world. I'm okay. I've done this. I've done that. I have a history of doing this and doing that. So therefore, I can just do what I want to do. I've built up enough good deeds. Astaghfirullah. Brothers and sisters, no one is asking us today to take up arms, and starting right with this masjid, that the masjid is being attacked. We need brothers to try to help, and it's a Sunday, the children are in the school. And so the phone call goes out that these idiots are attacking the mosque. Someone is going to get killed if we don't have someone to protect. No one at this moment is asking any Muslim man in this community to take up arms, come and defend the lives of these children and the brothers and sisters in the mosque. No one is asking us to do that if there come a time. But right now, this is not what we are being challenged to do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that we're weak. And he hasn't burdened us. He hasn't challenged us with this kind of responsibility like those Sahaba were challenged. From the time that they said, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, Allah knew the condition of their hearts. He didn't burden them with something that they couldn't withstand. He knew their condition. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved this example, not just of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but there's thousands of Sahaba and Tabi'een and Tabi'een that we know their stories. We know their authentic stories coming out of a society that was almost totally illiterate. But we know their stories. This is the gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. We don't have to just look around in our ranks and say, well, I want to be like that brother. I want to be like that sister. We have thousands who we can look through the history of Islam. If we don't see qualities that can inspire us, that would cause us to want to live the life as being truly muttaqin, then look at our history and get inspired by those who come before us, these righteous predecessors, starting at the time of the Prophet Muhammad all the way up to today. So, brothers and sisters, I first remind myself as I attempt to remind you that having the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah commanded to fear Him as He should be feared, is not some kind of sloganeering. It's not some kind of communist chant. It's not some kind of words that you just read in a book and say, oh, that sounds good. It is instruction for how you and I are to strive to conduct ourselves in this world, how we are to do everything that we possibly can before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala we take that last breath. You know, as I've gotten older, when I'm like much younger years as a Muslim, I would read certain ayahs in Quran. I would read certain hadith. I would read certain pages of history. But now, at the age where I am now, and I read the hadith where the Prophet Muhammad tells us that when you taslim to the right, don't even have it in your mind that you may be alive to just say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to your left. And there's so many of our brothers and sisters who have taslim one way or may not have even gotten to that point. People have been fasting in front of the Kaaba and died right there, making hajj or umrah. Brothers and sisters, I've read of a sister. Yeah, brothers and sisters of this ummah have died. Allah has taken their soul while reading the Quran. Little did they know that this would be the last opportunity that they could sincerely worship Allah and try to get it right, begging for forgiveness for what they've done wrong. So don't wait till you get to an older age to begin to wonder when you come to the masjid or make salah at home whether you're going to be able to even complete the salah that you're making. Don't wait until we're laying up in the hospital with tubes running in our bodies to start trying to say I have to be more serious about this deen, because none of us are guaranteed even the rest of this day. And so let's treat every moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us in a way that reflects that I have something in my chest. We have something in our chest. I don't need somebody to stand over me and watch me to see that I'm doing the right thing. We have something right there. And if that's pure, then our actions and behavior will be pure as well. Oh Allah, give us an understanding of this thing that is useful for us in this world and in the next.
Amen.
Oh Allah, purify our hearts and our actions so that you will be pleased with us.
Amen.
And oh Allah, make not this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad a test for the disbelieving people. Brothers and sisters, I have a few quick announcements. The first one